多久出来混的？
比较经验
15岁、
，15岁、13岁，刚混个头
14岁的时候，福建哪个比较偏低端的？15岁就出社会了。
努力的疯老头啊！
看像你们就是做什么的？
我们就全职疯老头啊！
你没工作？
没有工作。
What's going on with Chinese society? There's a subgroup sitting at the center of online content in China. Young men and women, sometimes even under 18. Welcome to Unclassified China, where we take a deeper look at different topics in China. Now, they go by different names: spirit girls, social boys, mental boys, and girls. Labels given to a very specific type of youth. The boys have shaved sides, bowl cuts, tight t-shirts, skinny jeans, and the girls heavy makeup, dyed hair, revealing outfits, and lots of tattoos. Now, you'll find them roaming the streets in especially second-tier or third-tier cities or townships, squatting on curbs, hanging around city corners. During the day, they wander around or sleep. At night, after clubbing or playing pool, 5 or 6 of them will pack themselves into a cheap rental or a day apartment. And yet, listening to these names, spirit girl or mental boy, something you can imagine is between wild and unhinged. But what you actually see doesn't match any of that energy. In recent years, they've become a staple of short-form video platforms like Douyin or Kuaishou. And if you look past the music, the dancing, and a lot of the outrageous editing, their living conditions are hard to ignore. They're visibly thin, scrawny. It's because they sometimes don't get to eat much, or maybe eat once a day. Intermittent fasting involuntarily, if you want to put it generously about the situation. But there's a video which clearly showcases this. A group of boys who are the spirit boys visiting a dumpling shop. There's about 8 to 9 guys, and there's 2 plates of dumplings between them. Barely enough for 2 people, I would say. And their exact source of income is unclear. Many people actually live one day at a time. And this group is interesting because it contradicts everything the CCP has put up about the image of China's youth, right? We're told that youth in China, kids in school are taught science, math, and critical thinking. We're told that Chinese kids are striving for success, or at least that the pressure to succeed is there. But this group gives off the vibe of the complete opposite. This is what I would call a collection of defeated young individuals roaming around society. Now, some in this group are obviously, still trying to make it out. They're genuinely trying. Take this girl, for example. Her name is Yahoo. She's a former spirit girl who found work at a fried chicken stand, and her boss took her in, looked past the tattoos and the image, and she was willing to do the job actually, because as the boss says,
纹身是他的这个性格特点，并不能决定他的好坏。他做事还可以，放得下面子，之前在这招个大学生，摆烂觉得丢人，他不会，挺好的。
just as the boss says, many of the college grads with degree papers don't really want to do this type of job. But she's not the majority of what you see in these videos. In fact, the more common picture are things like, for example, girls squatting on curbs with their phones out, texting men twice their age, asking for money. And they have a friends list of hundreds, if not thousands, of men that they found who added their contact into the phone of the girls, and they're essentially being asked to give them something like 10 to 20 yuan. Sometimes, the men will transfer a few hundred yuan. And I guess the intention is they hope that they will win something back from these girls. But then most of the time they get ghosted the moment these payments are cleared.
你算哪里？
我们50块钱住那个单间，然后我们4个人睡。
哦，就那个光明堂，多少钱？50块钱。
50块钱。
那今天没得住啦。
等我们先借一下钱，等我们借到了就不用你 A 了。
好，那一起借，一起借。
认真的，现在发20块钱给我，等我过2天还你。
借了，我借了，10块钱，
多少？谁来的？
啊，那个老头，我说我跟他说你没吃饭呢。
不是那10块钱你干嘛？
抽一点是一点。
The boys aren't that much different. In some of the videos, they're trying to pull together, 1 to 2 yuan each between 5, 6 people just so they can split a bowl of noodles. Working, or if they do work, is just enough so they can cover a date with one of the other spirit girls. And there's a whole segment, if you watch some of these videos long enough, about the dating scene amongst the spirit boys and girls. But that's a whole different topic. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments. Maybe I can do more of a deep dive on that. It's more psychological. Anyways, so running these small favors or scam groups is also common among boys. But it's more like, hey bro, can I borrow a few $100? Or one guy even pretended that he got stabbed just so he can get $20. But in reality, he was literally just asking for money so he can eat. And when some of the girls were asked directly, like, why did you roam the streets instead of trying to find a job? Their answer was very simple: it's tiring. One said that she had a waitressing job, met a boyfriend there, and ended up paying him 2,000 yuan a month just to be with him. So she then wised up and says, yeah, I don't want to work anymore. Maybe she should consider better dating choices, but that's just me. So yes, like some in this group, they're trying to do better, but many have simply decided that climbing the social ladder isn't worth it. And the question becomes, how did they get here, right? Well, these boys and girls come from usually rural areas. There might be individuals who have a pretty solid family background, but most of them, they have the small town, rural area background. Parents either couldn't afford to keep them in school, didn't care to keep them in school, or just simply, couldn't control their kids anymore, didn't care, who knows. But the point is, many of them didn't even finish junior high or high school. They simply stepped onto society far too early without the tools to understand or navigate it, and they found this little safe haven with other people like this. And here's what actually matters, right? Because the CCP has spent decades building and maintaining a structural wealth gap between the rural China and the urban side of China. And this is reflected in the fact that in 2020, the premier of China said 600 million Chinese people still live on the poverty line. The countryside was simply left behind, and the reform and opening up further exacerbated that wealth gap. Intentionally, systematically, likely. But the barrier for village students or rural area students trying to get into, say, a top university in China, like Tsinghua or Peking University, is vastly more difficult than a child or a student from Middle America trying to apply to Harvard. There's a lot of logistical, political, and also economical hindrance that somebody in China would be going through. Things like, you're from out of the province, is your hukou within that particular area, or if you're trying to move to a different city, the cost of living and everything else is, sometimes 10 times more than, say, somebody trying to go from Ohio to, say, Yale, right? But it's not because they're less capable, but it's simply because the system was never designed to lift them equally. There's no equal opportunity, so to speak. So what that created is this situation where the dream of many small town and rural youth isn't necessarily about going to college, it's about making it out of that town. That's already the achievement for them. And so it's just simply where they set the goal in life, right? And when even that falls into something that doesn't end up well, they end up here on the streets. And in these videos, it's in the subculture that we see this idea that it seems like they're somehow trendy or fashionable, or that somehow their behavior is now being seen as positive. And that's because social media has made it that way. This group gained a lot of visibility over the last 5-6 years because their behaviors became online content. In China, the consumption culture is very basic in the sense that people will consume anything pretty much. Now, you can say the same about the US, right? Just in general, social media, it's both ways. And it's creating a lot of these low, it wouldn't be called low quality content, but it would just be more like low status content. With the fact that, the dancing, the scams, the culture, the vulgar talking, and everything else around it. And that this culture, once it became an online presence, it just simply went wild because people started copying it. You had more younger kids who had more desires to copy these people than to actually go to school. And obviously, this still is a small percentage of people, but it's a little bit more now. It's being amplified, it's being copied, and it's becoming an identity. Now, some videos actually try to paint these spirit boys or girls as misunderstood, as raw, as authentic, honest, uncomplicated people who are just trying to get by. That's some, but that's not everybody, right? You still have people who are engaging in these street fights. You still have people who are engaging in very messed up behaviors. You have people who, actually commit those gray area industries, as they're calling China, which basically, things like OnlyFans type of thing, prostitution, all of those things, again, is for them to make a little bit of money too, so they can live, right? But it's a systemic failure, is what I'm trying to say. It's trying to make that, or finding excuses for that to become the real reason where people are pointing fingers towards, rather than, address the core issue, right? People are just simply looking on the surface. So what exactly happens to these people? Are they just going to live like this for the rest of their lives? But I would say be direct about it, right? For the girls, there's some path right now. None of them are good, I think, in my opinion, or would be established for the long term. Some of them, they get some work at night in the clubs. Others get into things like informal escorting, as I mentioned, prostitution. Some of them, kind of just live day by day, seeing what happens in the days that they're here. These type of videos, you had online creators, content creators who go up to these people and say, I'll give you 50 yuan, spend a day with me, that type of thing. And some of them try to become content creators. But you also have, in a country where your economic options are narrow for women without education, education or connections, it's a bad way to put it, but it really just, some of the stuff that you can do for these people is just some of those industries. Maybe it works for a few years, but youth is a currency for them, right? And that window closes fast. I would say faster than many people with education or with a stable job, maybe a decade or two. But once that leverage disappears, nobody wants to be with a spirit girl who's in their 30s or 40s. And that's, again, I don't mean it in a bad way, but that's just how it is. And so when you're done with that, you got no savings, you got no skills, there's no professional networks being made, and you have no education to fall back on. And so the point to it is, I think, arguably bleaker because China's a very male-heavy society. It's got a huge gender imbalance. So the competition for men is very severe. I don't think that many of them, well, here's the thing, right? Many of them don't have a long-term goal. And I think that's where I talk about this idea that they're the defeated youth because they know that they don't have much to begin with. They don't see much going for them. They don't see much in the future. You can call them that they're short-sighted or they don't have a dream or they don't have an ambition. But in that state, right? I'll talk a little bit more in the upcoming segment, but I think there's a sense of feeling sad for them. Like for the boys, right? Like they think that this is cool at their age. They're 17, 18, 19 in that environment. But what are they going to do in a society that is China, this heavily materialistic society without any money later? That's something that I think nobody considers in this group. And these boys are already at the bottom of the hierarchy, right? Now, the path forward for many of them, I don't think is upward. It's just continuing what's happening right now, scraping by, pooling money for a cup of noodles or a bowl of soup. And that condition doesn't change. So it brings us to, I think, the uncomfortable conclusion of this, which is how is this defeated group going to survive? The simple answer is by simply lying flat, campaigning as it's called in Chinese, you can sort of get by in China. It's very funny that, I'm very critical of the Chinese society, but if you want to do some of the stuff that they try to pretend like isn't happening, like semi-homelessness or living by very cheaply or, just getting by or existing, it's actually easy to do in China. I think much easier to do than in other countries because, food is cheap and you can almost get your way through by just haggling or just, doing some things that you can get yourself through for the day. But other than that, this is not just something that only applies to this group. The regular educated youth are also having problems with finding jobs. The overall economy is just not good, right? So at this point, when I was researching for a lot of the content online, I kind of came to this realization that everybody in China is lying flat to some degree. Some people may think that working a regular job and just not doing anything else, contributing to society is lying flat. But for this group, they're like, well, not working is not enough. Not doing anything is considered lying flat, right? Not contributing to anything. In fact, I barely have enough to eat. That's my version. But so that's the first point. This philosophy again, the whole thing is much bigger than these boys and girls. It's a societal issue, right? And so that's the first one. And the second one I think is they recognize that no matter what happens, you always are going to have a blockage, which is that because this is a structural issue, it doesn't have the welfare structure to support people, to catch people up to speed. It doesn't have anything where, say in Germany, if you lose your footing, the state provides unemployment benefits. In US, Canada, they all have that, housing assistance, those kind of things, right? So when you don't have a social safety net, you create one for yourself. And that's where I think they found this sort of a safe haven amongst each other. So against all of this, the people that are in the category of the spirit boys and spirit girls would rather look for places like, can I have more fun today? Can I enjoy more drinks? Can I smoke more packs? Can I fight more street fights? Those kind of things, because they understand that long term there's nothing going, there's no structural support for them, there's no upward trending. People are just going to be stuck in this place. My point here is not that we should suddenly feel sorry for people who are engaging in these petty thefts or street fights or scamming people, but it's, I think, to understand the reason behind this group, right? The refusal to engage with anything resembling responsibility is not the excuse for us to say that, oh yeah, we're supposed to suddenly copy these people. I think it's a huge point that I'm trying to emphasize is that these kids didn't choose the life that they started with. They made a choice later on in life, and a lot of that has to be pointed towards the blames of the society that they're around. Like it's much harder for you to move up a level in society in China than it is in other countries. And so, when there's not a lot going for them, and I think that's where they're slowly being pushed out from the mainstream, so to speak. So in that sense, the spirit boys and girls, they're not the anomaly, right? They are the logical outcome of segregated two different social structures between the urban and the rural areas, and they become a subculture because that somehow gave them the visibility, and that somehow has also earned them a little bit of an income space. They perform where this identity has gotten them through more, I would say, more benefits than not, just objectively speaking, as in terms of looking at this group. Now, while we shouldn't excuse the behaviors of this group where they're engaging in, we should be honest about what we're actually looking at. We're looking at young people, some still teenagers underage, that were failed early on, failed quietly, and failed completely. Many by choice, many started off on the wrong foot, and then they were basically handed a phone or a camera and an algorithm that rewards chaos, and that's the modern situation. The cause of creating this group is a social structure that produces them, that ignores them, and now they're watching them to go viral without really asking the question that could address the matter. Can we let this be changed, or how far are we going to let this go? Right? China often projects an image of a rising generation. It's disciplined, unified, destined for greatness. Spirit boys and girls are part of that generation. The image was never meant to include. They're the truth that the facade was built to hide. Thank you so much for watching this episode today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think?